a bomb blows up a pish town of Lockerbie.
As far as I know,
a bomb blows up a Pan Am jet over the Scottish town of Lockerbie.
as far as I know, I've lost my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and their house is just a 30-foot crater.
Middle Eastern terrorism has often had a devastating impact on the West, while adding little to its understanding of the Middle East. Some experts blame Syria for Lockerbie. British and American governments preferred the usual suspect, Libya. In 1984, a London policewoman had been killed by a shot from the Libyan embassy. Libya's leader, Gaddafi, or infamous and powerful, became a convenient target for attack by American presidents. And
at 7 o'clock, the naval forces of the United States launched a series of strikes against the headquarters, terrorist facilities, and military assets that support Muammar Gaddafi's subversive activities.
Gaddafi survived the bombing, but successful military response to Middle Eastern terrorism can fire the imagination of the Western public. The mass television audience in 1980 who watched British SAS troops storming the Iranian embassy in London to rescue hostages understood little of the politics behind the drama. But the news footage had great propaganda value for a British government trying to counter people's feeling of impotence in the face of terrorism. But in the Middle East, a Western military presence often only magnified the power of terrorism. Beirut, 1983. 241 Marines killed by an Islamic suicide bomber.
We speculate a car bomb, but we don't know. We'll require further investigation before we know what happened.
In his book, Islam and the Myth of Confrontation, Fred Halliday has tried to broaden our understanding of Middle Eastern conflicts.
The Middle East has been one of the areas in which terrorism, meaning by that terrorism from below, has been most evident in the last 20 or 30 years. And it's very often associated with Islam itself. But I think this is very, very simplistic. In the first place, while there is within Islam a tradition going back a long way, including to the first assassins, the Hashashiyin, those who consumed hashish, of validating assassination, there are also many other traditions within Islam which are against terrorism and against attacks on civilians, and which have what in Western Thomist, Catholic and religious tradition would be called a principle of discrimination. In other words, you only kill those who are guilty, not those who are innocent. You don't attack civilians. So Islam, in fact, is, like all religions, a variant source of authority. You can justify one thing, you can justify the other. And I think it's worth pointing out that many of those in the Islamic world who've carried out acts of terrorism, one thinks of hijacking, for example, have actually been secular, left-wing, Marxist-Leninist groups, inspired by Mao Zedong rather than inspired by the Prophet Muhammad. At the same time, one can see terrorism in the Middle East carried out from below by groups with different religious and cultural backgrounds. The Zionists in Israel up to 1948 contain elements, the Irgun group and others, the Stern Gang, who were certainly involved in terrorist acts, killing British soldiers in captivity, putting bombs in hotels.
After a bomb explosion caused by terrorists on the British headquarters at Jerusalem, one entire corner of the King David Hotel, a building of 7 stories, was razed to the ground. The stone floors were cut clean away as if they'd been hit by a 1,000-pound bomb from above. Housed in the destroyed wing were the greater part of the government offices where work was in full swing at the time of the outrage. The latest casualty list included 65 killed, 47 injured, and 58 missing, though it is doubtful if any of those missing are still alive.
Once again, terror comes to Jerusalem with the blowing up of an entire shopping center in Ben Yehuda Street, the shattering prelude to a day of sorrow. Within minutes of the explosion, those who escaped were frantically joining with troops and ambulance parties in the work of rescue. Growing confusion was caused by conflicting stories of the outrage, for which Arab quarters later claimed responsibility.
The first and most enduring mistake of talking about the Middle East is to talk about one Middle Eastern problem, by which people usually mean the Arab-Israeli problem. The Middle East is a mosaic of interlocking problems, of which the Arab-Israeli question is certainly one. But you have the Arab-Persian problem as well. You have the problem of non-democratic governments in Egypt or Saudi Arabia or whatever it may be, or in Iran. And therefore, terrorist acts can be part of the Arab-Israeli context, they can be part of the Arab-Persian context. I mean, remember the Iraqi agents who were sent to seize the Iranian embassy in London in 1980. Or it can be part of conflict within states. I mean, bomb explosions in Egypt or in Saudi Arabia or in Iraq or in Iran are to do with people who are opposed to those particular governments. But 90% of the time, I would say, with some foreign support, the support of some other foreign state who's helping them. All Middle Eastern states regarded as legitimate when national interest so dictates, or as they interpret national interest, to send people into other countries, to carry out assassinations, to let off bombs, whatever it may be. And that has become a broad feature of Middle Eastern politics.
What do you hope to achieve? You see, definitely it's our rights and our hope to return back to our homes, from which we had been kicked by force of imperialism and Zionism.
The PLO was set up in 1964 by the Arab states as a way of promoting but also controlling the Palestinian cause. And it was always challenged by other Palestinian groups and by radical groups within the Arab world who wanted to use the Palestinian cause for other purposes. So what you saw, particularly after the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, when the conventional Arab states, and particularly Egypt, were discredited, was you saw the rise of Palestinian groups who were not controlled by the PLO or were only formally part of it, and who were supported by radical Arab states such as Syria or Iraq or later Libya, who thought that they could promote their own interests, their own factional interests, if you like, within the Palestinian cause, by carrying out spectacular terrorist acts, of which the hijacking and blowing up of planes was the most obvious example. But one has to see this as much within the context of inter-Arab rivalry and inter-Palestinian rivalry as anything to do with the Israelis or the West.
In the 1980s, various Islamic groups seized Western hostages in Beirut.
We can move to release Sheikh Abdul Karim Obed. Don't be late, because they are very serious to hang us. And the period becomes very soon, and the hour is very little.
Mes enfants, je salue tous mes amis, le disant bientôt peut-être.
Terrorism and the intensity of terrorism is often a product of internal rivalries as much as it is of external confrontation. If one looks at the practice of what the Iranians have done, for example, in supporting groups in Lebanon, in supporting groups in Afghanistan, in supporting groups, armed groups inside Iraq, in sending people to Western Europe to carry out assassinations, the logic is political. The logic is command the respect of your own people by doing outrageous things, but also show that you're struggling against the West more than the other countries in the region.
But in 1993, former sworn enemies, PLO leader Yasser Arafat and Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, marked the signing of a peace agreement by shaking hands. 2 years later, Rabin was killed by a terrorist. The assassin, opposed to the peace plan, an Israeli.